Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back with another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled today to have Roy Thompson join us. Roy, first of all, welcome and thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us.
Thank you for having me out today. I appreciate it very much.
Could you start off by telling us your professional background?
Interesting background. I guess as most bankers start out, I was a farm and ranch child out, which I think I've got a very odd background, but started out in West Texas between Lubbock and Wichita Falls. Grew up in a small town, farming and ranching. Went to Texas Tech and really didn't have my eyes on banking. I had my eyes on commercial real estate. But as we were talking a little bit earlier, I was going to graduate in 1987. And the professor that had the most influence on me at that point in time was a professor who had actually been a real estate investor and financier and then was giving back to the community. And I told him I really wanted to try to get a job with Trammell Crow or Lincoln Properties, one of the big guys. And he said, "We're fixing to have a tax law change in July of '87 that's going to really change banking. It's going to be a downturn. And it's going to change the real estate world. And I would suggest, though, that you go interview with the banks and maybe get on with the bank." He said, "I think you got the right personality." And of course, at that age, when I heard him say that, I wasn't sure he even liked me anymore. But I thought, oh, at least go interview. I went and interviewed with the banks and really found their interview process and the way they were getting into asking very intelligent questions about your background and your abilities that I said, "I'd like this more than I thought I was going to." And I went to work for M Corp M Bank in downtown Dallas in 1987 through a management training program to be a commercial lender, commercial loan officer. And then I made the move from, and as a lot of the banks did in 1987, M Corp M Bank failed. They were eventually bought by Bank One. And in '93, I had some personal reasons I needed to get back to West Texas. My father had passed away, and I wanted to get back to Lubbock so I could close up his estate. I've often joked, I think I'm the only commercial lender that ever inherited more debt than I had lending authority. So I had to go farm my way out of debt for a year or two. So I actually went back to Lubbock and Norwest Bank, which became actually acquired Wells Fargo and kept the Wells Fargo name. Their first acquisition was the banks out in West Texas and Lubbock. So I went back and went to work for them, got my dad's estate cleaned up. And I think it was actually the third bank they acquired. I think it was New Braunfels was number two. And then number three was the First National Bank of Kerrville. Got to working with the gentleman down here that knew this bank well. I'd had some prior restaurant lending experience, especially with the real estate side of it. And they asked me to come down and look at a couple of restaurant loans and fell in love with the hill country and with the bank down here. And was only in Lubbock just under 2 years, moved down here with Norwest, took over the bank. In 2007, left Wells Fargo and been in Kerrville since '95. But in 2007, I bought into Union State Bank at that point in time. And that was a good run for 4 or 5 years before I had the chance to make a move and buy in to what was then Bandera First State Bank. We changed the name to Texas Hill Country Bank when I came on board because I knew we'd be opening an office in the Kerrville area. And we actually opened it right across the street here, our first office in Kerrville. So that's been my background. It's primarily been the commercial lending, then been president and CEO of now two different banks and really enjoyed it.
Do you currently have a focus, a lending focus, or is it full service bank with a variety of?
We're really a full service bank. Texas Hill Country Bank, which is a part of Texas Partners Bank, and I'll explain that a little bit more later on. But we're your small town bank, but with big shoes. And what I mean by that is we have a legal lending limit up over $45 million, but we focus on 300, 400, $500,000 loans all the way up to we've got one or two customers in the 20, $25 million range here in our Kerrville loan portfolio. But our bread and butter is that 500,000 to a couple of $1 million. But we also do consumer lending. And we've recently introduced what we call hub lending, which is a scoring system based primarily on your personal credit score. And it's also based on it's a host of other factors, how long you've been in business, et cetera, where we can either do small business loans or personal loans. And it's really been working extremely fast. We've been able to turn loans in less than 24 hours.
I've had the chance to visit with you before, and one of the things that intrigued me was you talking about being bank president in a small town and going to the grocery store, maybe going to a Tybee football game or somewhere out
Mhm.
in the public and really everybody knows you.
You really do, and you don't realize things at the time, and I would tell a lot of people, especially young people, take for granted growing up in a smaller town and having a lot of interaction with a lot of different type of people. I didn't know that growing up in Matador, Texas, a small farm and ranch community that had a population sign of 1,200 people and probably had less than 2,000 people in the county. I didn't know that would actually suit me very well later in my business life. Because in a small town, you know everyone, they know you. But you can't act like an idiot in a small town and not everybody know about it. So you learn to dot your I's and cross your T's. But you also learn to be friendly and you cross all boundaries. I remember the first time I had heard about diversity training. I think it was in downtown Dallas with Bank One and probably 89 or 90, 91, somewhere in there. And after I heard the diversity training, I'm like, that was like going to school in Matador. You had every kid, every socioeconomic. There wasn't a kid for the kids with special needs. Everybody was in the same classroom. So you had to learn to work together, help each other. So I think you got a lot of natural diversity training. And then when you come to a town like Kerrville, it's way bigger than Matador, but it's still a small town, especially when you're out in the community as much as I am. And I absolutely love being in a small town and people saying hello and stopping and asking you questions in the supermarket. Is it always convenient? No, but hey, you know what? I'd rather stop and answer that question than miss out on an opportunity to help a friend or a customer or even just someone in town that needs the help.
So I'm a transplant or migrant to
Mhm,
Kerrville. I've been here about 3 years now, and one of the things that has struck me is there is opportunity in this town, literally from for the 22-year-old to the 66-year-old in my
mhm.
case, and one of the things we debate in this studio is Kerrville really an economic opportunity? How do you see the economic opportunity for a young person in Kerrville?
Even when I came here in 1995, as a banker, you wanna look for 3 important things, and the first one was you gotta have a good school system. We have a great school system in Kerrville Independent School District, even Ingram, but we're also surrounded with Fredericksburg and Comfort, even Bandera. We've got great school districts. We got teachers that are here just like we are. They wanna be here. They enjoy teaching these kids, and the kids are well behaved here overall. Next, you hope to have a good secondary education. Schreiner University's done a good job. You need good medical. You and I are probably gonna be taking more advantage of that as we keep getting a little bit older, but we've got a fantastic hospital here. I've been so fortunate to be involved with Peterson, both giving them money. My mother who's passed away down here, but she went to the hospital for many years, used their hospice care. So I've seen one-on-one what our hospital medical staff can do, and those things are important to the economic vitality of the town. And then really the third thing is having a good city that's well run, that financially is strong, and we have that. You might not always agree with everything the city does or doesn't do, but overall, this is a well run city. So when you look at those things, we have a lot of economic potential. Then we've got great fiber, great connectability. So someone like you, we were talking about earlier, you can come down here and run your business worldwide if you want to because of the great things we have in our city.
We all recently attended the economic summit put on
Mhm.
by the Chamber of Commerce, and your bank was kind enough to be a lead sponsor in that event. And I love those events because they talk about obviously the city of Kerrville, but really Kerr County and even the Hill Country. How did you come out of that event? How did you feel?
I'm always very optimistic. As a banker, you want steadiness. You don't want 40% growth and then 10% negative. You're always happy with good, steady growth. And Kerrville has ever since I've been here since 1995, runs a much more 4 to 5, 6% growth in the good years. When Dallas, Austin, Houston may be hitting 15, 18%, we're still a little bit slower in the growth, but we don't have the downturns typically that they have, and that is very important to a healthy economic situation.
I'd like to turn to your assistance with Schreiner University
Mhm,
and the banking certification program. As an outsider coming from an urban environment, I really had not focused on rural issues.
mhm,
And in talking to people, particularly in the ranching industry, they had a real need for bankers to
mhm,
work with. And we're finally getting a new generation of ranchers, many of them my age or even older. who
Right.
had long-term relationships, but that
Mhm.
now they've got a younger generation that does business a little bit different way. They
Mhm.
have the internet, they're tech savvy, and there's a real need for that, I saw as an outsider, but I wanted to ask you as a banker, how do you see that program?
Absolutely. I wanna give a shout out to Kenneth Early, who's my senior lender over at the bank. He worked with the Texas Bankers Association. I work with the Independent Bankers Association of Texas, but we both crisscross with those 2 associations. Both of them do a great job and are great on the education front. We went with them, and then Kenneth got with a lot of the earlier banks, with all of the surrounding banks, excuse me, to raise funds to help Schreiner start a banking certification program and to introduce more classes out there. And then each one of the bankers in town, even though we compete against each other, we're all still really good friends. And we go out there and take turns teaching and giving the kids real world experience and talking about job paths and what they need to be doing to be involved. And as you and I were talking earlier, there's been a nationwide 30% decline in people in finance and accounting. So both the CPA side of our business as well as the lending side of our business, we need good people in banking, and we're trying to steer more kids that way with this program. And I love giving back, going out and talking to the kids. And I think if you asked any banker in town that participates, they'd tell you the same thing.
Do you see opportunity for a college graduate to move into banking even in a rural area in 2024?
Absolutely. And we've seen more people, especially post pandemic or during the pandemic, that chose a way of life. And they said, you know what? I may not need to make as much money as I could make in Dallas or Houston or Austin or San Antonio, but I want a certain way of life. And a young kid coming straight out of college can go to work here. We've hired several out of Schreiner. And one of the young men just got a new great opportunity to go back to work with Schreiner as it relates to their new football program. But one of the reasons he's getting to go back is the experience he gained in football, gained at Texas Hill Country Bank, and he's going to be working with their football program. And so it's hard to imagine you could relate those two, but somebody's got to keep up with the accounting of the football program. So he's going to be back to work with them, and I'm excited for him. I like to see our folks do well.
I had the opportunity last fall to moderate a panel on city government and businesses. And one of the things that struck me, and there were several of your contemporaries who were on that
Mhm.
panel, and it struck me that I wouldn't say there's a public private partnership, but there's great collaboration
Right.
between the city government and local businesses. Would that be consistent with what you see?
Absolutely, and I think some of that is you look again, I talk about Kenneth Early. He sits on EIC right now. A lot of my customers sit on various boards or groups with the city, and I've helped out in the past too. It's a servant's heart. You feel like you see a need and you feel like somebody's not serving that need or is not available to do it. We take our turn going and being involved in those boards and in those government entities to help them get things done because it does take a village to raise the village sometimes.
I really appreciate you mentioning the EIC. Could you tell us the role of the local banking community with the EIC in the city?
The local banking community, and I think some of this has to do with how bigger companies move themselves to a new location. A lot of times it's a top secret program. It's even got a code name or a code word that goes with it. And they want to come in and be anonymous and look at 2 or 3 different communities. Our job is when those folks come in, if the city wants us to respond and talk about banking or talk about some of the exact same things that we're talking about here, we load up, go sit in front of those folks and talk to them and give them the information that they need to make a good decision in moving their company. Oftentimes, we don't know on the front end what that company does or where we're at on the list of them choosing us or potentially choosing us, but we're willing to give our time and effort to go and sit and talk about that. And I think that's one of the key things as a banker is when you're called upon, find somebody in your organization that can go answer that call.
So we met because of our joint membership in Rotary. So I want to ask you a few
Mhm.
questions about Rotary.
Sure.
Why did you join Rotary and what do you get out of it?
I've been in Rotary for a lot of years, and I joined Rotary because when I got here, it was one of the top service clubs, and it's well attended. I liked their attendance requirements back in the day. They've relaxed that a little bit, especially with COVID and some things that happened. but it's a very good service club, but it's also business people oriented. And that's very helpful because I get to see people there that I might not get to see any other time of the month or even in a quarter. And so it's very good to be able to see them. And plus, I like the social aspect of it. It's a fun group. They like to get together, and you have to eat lunch every Wednesday somewhere. So why not do it at Rotary? And I would encourage any young people out there to go find out what Rotary's about and look into several service clubs. But I think when you look at Rotary, you'd find out there's a lot of value there.
Can you tell us, 1 or 2 of the service projects that either have meant a lot to you that you've maybe enjoyed working in?
Our bank, the last couple of years, have focused on the river cleanup. We see Rotary doing that, saw what a good program it was. I took it back to the bank and said, "All right, we're gonna get a team together every year and work doing the UGRA river cleanup." And we have fun. We always like to see what's the weirdest item we can find. And it's unfortunate that you find weird items in the river, but people somehow think weird things get in the river. And we found all sorts of tires, tons of golf balls, few golf clubs. That may have been my golf club. I get a little excited with my golf game every now and then, but no, you find weird things in the river and they come down from the strangest places, but we have a lot of fun with it as a group and it gets our group out of the bank and lets everybody get to know each other in a different way.
Roy, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode, but if our listeners wanted more information on yourself or the bank, what might be the best place for them to go?
One, I would always encourage them to give me a call. My phone number at the bank's 830-955-8528 and encourage you to give me a call, but you're welcome to go to our website for Texas Hill Country Bank or Texas Partners Bank, and I'll give that last shout out. Our true legal name is Texas Partners Bank, but we do business as Texas Hill Country Bank, the Bank of San Antonio, and the Bank of Austin. We've always been really one bank, but we operated as 3 separate banks, and slowly but surely, we're gonna change that name to full-blown Texas Partners Bank, which I'm excited about because if you do a case study on marketing, it cost us almost $1 million a year to operate under essentially 4 different names.
As a recovering trial lawyer, I can certainly understand that too. I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to visit with us, and I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Tom, thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate it.